Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to our DriveThruRPG review, my written and video review series. Take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at DriveThruRPG.com. For this video, I'll be reviewing the one-shot adventure, The End of the Line, designed by James Terry Collins, aka Bring Your Own Dragons, for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my content, consider using my affiliate links for your online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/RogueWatson. The End of the Line is a fantastic song by the Traveling Wilburys, which was a folk rock group from the early 80s, included amazing members like Bob Dylan, George Harrison, and Tom Petty. Look up the Traveling Wilburys. You won't regret it. However, The End of the Line is also a adventure one-shot module based on a Western. In this case, it takes place on a train. It's designed for level 3 parties, and I think essentially turning a train into a dungeon crawl is a really, really cool idea. Obviously, you have to be okay with trains in your fantasy world, so it's not necessarily designed for Eberron either. It's still fantasy. There's not guns or anything that I can recall. It's still very much, I don't know, but you have to be okay with, I don't think trains exist in the Forgotten Realm, so there's a little bit of disconnect there where you have to be accepting of that. But if you are, which again may be more compatible with Eberron, although it is a steam locomotion, I think it's a cool idea in that it starts out as basically a train robbery in which the players could be a part of or could be defending against, which is a neat kind of branching path, that eventually morphs into a classic escaped monster moment where, of course, the robbery goes awry because the robbers end up freeing the cargo, and the cargo in this case is a nasty undead creature, which has... It's technically not, this is not a DM's Guild product, so you can't use any of the stuff, but it is based on a wraith, basically, and it can create other undead. So you can see where that immediately creates a more tense situation that, of course, ends up in a classic speeding train that the players then have to be able to complete a skill challenge that could possibly result in the death of everybody in the town and on the train, including the players. Yikes. But I think it's pretty fun. It's got a really nice style to it where it's supposed to, look like it's a Western style with that kind of parchment style art. It's got the cursive lettering for handouts. I like having immersive handouts a lot. I do think it's worth including like a translation because it is tricky for me to sit there and squint and try to read, what's actually being said here in this handout. So while I like that for players, I think it's handy for DMs. Just give me the translation. Just tell me what it says in regular font so I don't have to strain to read it. We do get a few adventure hooks that involve, which we're really going to get the hook anyway. So they're in this town, and they're going to be hired by Luella Parker, who works this train and is kind of in charge of shipping a lot of goods, in this case, illicit goods, I assume. Who the hell was shipping some kind of undead monster creature? And there's the opening scene takes place in the tavern, the saloon, I guess. There's so many fun things you could do with a Western saloon that we would all love to do in D&D. Or in any fantasy RPG that are not done here, which is a disappointment. The only thing that happens is you meet up with a bunch of outlaws who are here, and this is where it gets tricky because there's a lot of scripted things that have to happen in the story to have the story continue. And if there's one thing that's really hard to design in any kind of tabletop RPG, it's trying to make a compelling story and having your players follow along this cool path, but at the same time accepting the fact that they're probably going to go off the beaten path and do their own thing and not either pick up the clues or accept what's going on or they'll split the party or doing something. And here's the first instance of a problem, which is in order for this story to function, the outlaw has to pickpocket the key from Luella, the quest-giving NPC, and escape. And it mentions the fact that the players, this happens in full view of the players, where if they've got, perception, they can see it happen. Obviously they can confront him, they can try to beat him up just because he's an outlaw sitting there. A lot of it depends on who your players are. Are they a bunch of scoundrels and rogues, in which case they'll probably want to work with him? Or are we talking more like paladins and clerics, in which case they're going to just arrest him for being an obvious outlaw? So automatically you can see the problem there. While I like the fact that you've got villains that are reoccurring, it's a very, very tricky thing to do in RPGs because how do you have them escape without some kind of DM magic tool or something? And I don't think there's a satisfying way of doing that here. So I'm not sure if I really agree with how this is written, which is It says, in any case, make sure Jesse, which is the outlaw, leaves the brass rail with the skeleton key in hand. He's key to future action later in the adventure. Well, if that's the case, then you need to make sure you put a number of obstacles or special things, or have him have some kind of invisibility potion or something where he can get away and be able to reappear later on, or have him not appear for the first time until he's in the middle of the train anyway, and just have it tease the fact that there's some shady outlaws there. I don't know, but I kind of had a problem with that. The actual adventure pretty much starts once we're in the train car. Now, keep in mind, before then, it's possible that you could align yourself with Jesse, and the way it works is he could agree to pay you, some of the winnings in terms of you basically turning a blind eye. So you'll still kind of be hired as the muscle, as the bodyguards of this cargo for the train, but you could choose to work underhandedly with the villains, and basically they'll know a password which will essentially eliminate like the entire first half of this dungeon crawl. Like, you'll just be able to go through everybody. So that's interesting there. That, I kind of like the fact that that's an option for the players, but it also makes a lot of this adventure kind of boring if you're not actually dealing with things. Although one of the train cars does have the passengers beating up an outlaw, so that could actually really represent a moral quandary for the players if they were just kind of in it for the money, but now they see the people you've aligned with or against are now beating the shit out of each other. I do wish that our bandits had more personality. So the notes on Jesse are not very good. It just says he's a short, wiry man full of nervous energy, carries a lucky dagger and a sheath in his belt, and his eyes are constantly scanning the room. Doesn't miss a trick. That's it. So that's all we get on him, and we don't see him until much later. Otherwise, it's a bunch of just outlaws that are unnamed doing things with passengers, and there's a lot of opportunities for missed social situations, I think, for players that really want to be able to diffuse things by talking to folks, instead of it just equaling, straight up combat. So it would have helped if there were some names, if there were some notes on some of the, I don't need huge backstories on all these different NPCs. It's not what I'm asking for, but just at least a name and a sentence for some of these bandits and maybe occasional passenger. We do get some for the passengers. Occasionally, like, there's a traveling salesman with goods of spurious efficacy. That's fine. I would like more of that, basically, for all these different, because that's what you see in a lot of these train cars, is these interactions between passengers and bandits, and instead of writing out these scenes, it just kind of mentions them in passing almost. There are opportunities to leap up into the roof, and all of these train cars could potentially involve different hazards as the train barrels down the tracks. Unfortunately, most of the hazards just end up knocking you prone, which if you're not in the middle of combat doesn't really do anything, which is kind of disappointing. But I do like the fact that you can climb up on the roof, and every single one of the train cars has a roof section where it says what you're seeing, what's going on, as well as if there's any enemies up there, which there are. There's, I feel like they kind of like spawn enemies if you go up there to make it interesting, which is fine. I think that's a fun opportunity. I don't think there's any rules about what happens if you like fall, which is always a really tricky situation. Oh wait, there we go. Creatures falling between two carriages take damage, but they can climb back up. But if they fall off the side of the train, they're instantly killed. So that's a bummer. You can go into a hanging position at least and climb back up. That's always a tricky situation when you're in, that thing where just one false step will kill you. Well, players and depending on the DM, you might want to try to shove each other off the train and make that classic, action sequence of a moving vehicle, which again is a really neat location for a dungeon crawl. Obviously, it's very linear because you start at essentially one end of the train. There's technically one behind you, but it's got nothing in there. And then you make your way I think you're making your way forward, because you make your way to obviously the front of the train where you control it. And that's it. That's the whole linear dungeon crawl, is just going through, dealing with, bandits sticking up passengers, or in one case, there's a passenger beating the shit out of a bandit, like they've turned the tables. There are a few train cars that are just full of, like, hazards, like there's logs chained up, or there's a bunch of crates that falling over, in which case it represents kind of a trap hazard room. So it does a good job of, even though you're in a train the whole time, it offers a variety of events and situations, but I would have liked like a specific social scene that was kind of better scripted, rather than just kind of mentioning in passing, like, hey, somebody's beating the shit out of somebody else. So a little more detail on how to deal with these socially, and maybe a little more personality interjected in our actual bandits. So eventually we get to about the 2/3 of the way through, and we finally catch up with Jesse, who has stolen the key from Luella, which again had to have happened, but there's other ways you can do that, or just have him, whatever. You can just have him produce the key, like, hey, I stole this off screen. You don't have to do it in front of the players, because they're gonna have a chance to shut that down. He breaks open the special cargo container, and of course it contains this really nasty monster, which is called a Tahian, but it's basically a wraith. That emerges and has a really awesome horror cutscene where he just rips the skin off this bandit outlaw, and then both the skin pile, which I think is used as the skinless stat block, and the body, which is used as a zombie, attack the players while the creature then runs and continues to wreak havoc. That's really neat. So instead of having like a bunch of creatures that get loose or one really powerful creature, although a wraith is kind of CR4 and this is for level 3, so it's kind of strong. But I like the fact that we've got a monster that can spawn other monsters. And actually, not only does it deal damage and kill people, but it actually turns them into enemies. That's a really, really cool twist to put into this. What starts out as just kind of a normal train robbery event. So I thought that was really cool to inject this whole horror cutscene and moment in there. There's only like 2 more cars after here where it's, ripping through people. And it's not making zombies of all of them. One of them is just kind of injured and you can help him and maybe get a potion of healing out of it. You can jump up on the roof and you see it rip somebody else, which the rules of this thing aren't exactly reflected in the stat block. It says it can turn people into zombies, but what it's doing in these cutscenes is A, it's making people into zombies and skinless, or B, at one point it rips somebody's like shadow out or something, and then it creates a shadow in a zombie. That's really cool from a DM standpoint, but it's just not unfortunately reflected in the stat block. I think they just used the straight up raid stat block. So I would have made this monster a lot more stronger at the end, or I would have included some minions, because as it is, you see these cutscenes happen and you fight the minions in 2 different cars. And then when you get to the end, it's just that wraith alone, which still, they're pretty strong. All the stat blocks are included here, but it doesn't have multi-attack. So if it misses with its life drain, I don't know. It's tricky for me to wrap my head around a boss fight that doesn't have something with either legendary actions or minions. And I feel like at least having, it can make minions. Like it should have some minions with it. So I was a little disappointed in that final fight. Could have been a little bit more stronger, but I like the idea behind a monster that is wreaking havoc and specifically killing people and then turning them into other minions, which is really cool. We do get maps included, as you notice as I'm flipping through this product. The blueprint style is fine, and it helps me as a DM to wrap my head around the train thing, although it's not hard to picture, going through train cars anyway. The product listing specifically says we've got maps like ready for Roll20 and stuff. This is not what I would consider like VTT-able. There's no color on here. It looks like a schematic essentially, which again is fine for DMs and for players to even look at on a table, but actually playing with on Roll20, you're not going to want to use this. It doesn't have any texture, it doesn't have any color or anything like that. No, there are some details, I guess, with the crates and things, but it's not really good enough for prime time on a VTT. But we do get maps of all the train cars, so to me, whenever that happens, when I have mixed feelings about a map, I just don't include it on either a pro or a con, so it's kind of a wash for me. Yes, thumbs up that we got a map, but thumbs down that doesn't have proper color or textures or anything like that. And then the finale is a skill challenge to actually stop this speeding locomotive, because that's just kind of what you do when you have an action movie with a train sequence. Is you're going to have to stop this thing because the conductor, I guess, has been killed, and I don't know if he's dying. Sorry, he hasn't been killed, and for some reason it's out of control, and the players have to control it. Maybe it would have been more interesting if they had to do this while the fight was happening. I think I would have tried to incorporate that a little better, like make it so it was a time thing. So that, when you're fighting the monsters, somebody has to be doing the skill challenges. I don't know if that'd be better or worse, but the way it's timed is that after you fight the monster, then you have to deal with the skill challenge. And it does give you a number of options to give your players if they're not thinking outside the box in terms of what they can do. You can use perception or intelligence or strength in terms of looking at what levers to use. You can use medicine to try to revive the conductor long enough for him to tell you, okay, you need to mess with this. And then depending on what successes you make, that actually dictates how the ending, what happens with the end, which I do like. It's not just a binary decision here, although if you get 0 successes, the train just crashes and kills everybody on board and destroys the town that it's coming to. So that's obviously a pretty big bummer if you've been doing things relatively well up until then and just shit the bed on this skill challenge and just everybody dies, which maybe that's a memorable thing to have happen. I don't know. That's why I would make this for a good one shot too. If you get moderate amount of successes, the train crashes A lot of passengers are killed, monsters escape, but the players are still, they survive at least, and, it's just kind of an apocalyptic scene at that point. If you get mostly successes, the train successfully stops, but like one of the monsters releases, so now you have to hunt down like this escaped monster, and then of course you get all successes, it's just hunky-dory, everything stops, and you're free to go with no monsters escaping. So I like the fact there's multiple options here, and it's, I ultimately have kind of mixed feelings about skill challenges, but I think this one was mostly appropriate for the end. I feel like it maybe just could have been incorporated into the final boss fight a little bit. And then depending on what of those skill challenges you ended up with, we get multiple epilogues which describe all of these different scenarios, some of which could end up with just everybody dead. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for the end of the line. Pros: a series of train cars makes for a unique, fun setting for a linear dungeon crawl. Yes, obviously it's very linear. You're just going train car to train car, but as somebody who enjoys action movies and westerns and things, I like that a lot. I can definitely picture a party really enjoying that scenario, especially because all the train cars offer different things going on. There's a different dynamic, and we'll get to the other pros right here. Train car roofs represent alternate paths for the party. So even though it's linear, you could technically split the party, or you could all go up on the roof and still, you would avoid a lot of the hazardous things down below, but on the roof you suddenly have rain pelting, so it gets slippery. It's obviously way more dangerous because you could fall off and die, and there's still bandits out there. So I do enjoy the fact that the designer thought to include a technically alternate path, even though it's still very much a train. And pro, it effectively morphs from a train robbery into a monster slasher scenario, and I thought it did that very effectively. I loved that super nasty cutscene where the wraith thing literally just rips off the guy's skin, and suddenly that thing's shuffling towards you, and then it escapes to wreak havoc. You hear screams, and it keeps doing that to people. Really, really nice, even if the actual finale of just having the creature by itself cornered at the end is a little bit of a letdown, anticlimactic, but I did like that initial scene and that transition from, okay, we're on a action western to like, oh shit, now we're on like a fucking horror movie with this self-contained space with this deadly monster. Very alien. Cons: it requires an NPC pickpocketing another NPC and successfully escaping for the plot to function. That did bug me a lot, and I think there are ways you can write around that, like not doing that. But that just reminded me of a problem that I would have with my party. Anytime you have to have something happen at the table, you need to have backup plans. You need to design those backup plans and offer those to me, because players can and will upset all of those plans. Somebody will notice that happening. They will confront Jesse, or they will arrest him, or, level 3 parties, you're still low level. You can still throw your weight around against a bunch of like bandits and what essentially is a bandit captain. Like, it would not be a big deal. Just blow things up. You get that key back, and then you've just basically completed the entire adventure without even making it onto the train. So that's where I can see problems coming out of. And the other con is that the train robbing outlaws and plucky passengers lack personality and dialogue. So I was really hoping we would get some more moments, some more optional social encounters, or at the very least, give the DM the tools to create a social encounter if the players want to go that route. In other words, give me some names, give me a few short personalities, because that's a very fun thing to do. Is when people are doing a holdup, they're not like vicious cultists or monsters or anything. They're just, bank robbers or something. Those, I think having personalities there and having optional social scenes would be very receptive to a lot of players. Final verdict: the end of the line effectively combines Western and horror themes with a robbery and an escaped monster, all aboard a speeding train. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and you can support my work at patreon.com/RogueWatson. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons: Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Wizard Princess, Christopher Thomas, Captain Mike, Adam, Aiden, Stan, Nathan, Alex, Chad, Alexander, Dan, Daniel, Cam, and the Quizat, Hatterack. Gold patrons: RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Dead Lizard, Lion, Sam, Arash, Slumpy Spuds, Jerome, Scalenia, Nick, Farty Mick, Butterpants, Blood Angel, Veronis, Baboon, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, and James. Thank you all very much for your support.